The young man fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking slightly as he inserted them into the ignition of his old, battered car. The paint was faded, chipped in many places, and the hood bore scratches from years of neglect. The tires were worn thin, barely holding air, and the rear bumper sagged from a long-ago minor accident that had never been fixed. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and turned the key. The engine groaned, coughed, and finally rattled to life with a weak, spluttering sound. A small plume of smoke escaped from under the hood, curling into the cold morning air. He coughed lightly, waving the smoke away, trying to ignore the curious eyes that had already gathered. People passing by stared at the scene, some smirking, some shaking their heads in disbelief. As he tried to focus, a woman from his office walked toward the parking lot. She was tall, dressed immaculately in her professional clothes, her hair perfectly styled. She carried a coffee cup in one hand and a folder in the other, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes widening in exaggerated shock as she took in the sight of the struggling car. "Oh my God!" she exclaimed loudly, drawing the attention of others around. Her voice carried over the hum of the morning traffic, sharp and mocking. "Is this your car? You drive this thing?" She laughed, a high, cruel laugh that made his jaw tighten. Other co-workers, already near the parking lot entrance, noticed her reaction and began to join in. One whispered something to another, and soon, a chorus of laughter erupted. "Wow, look at that. I can't believe he still drives that junk," another voice called out. "Do you need help pushing it to the mechanic?" someone else added, feigning concern but clearly enjoying the spectacle. The young man kept his hands on the steering wheel, knuckles white, eyes fixed straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact. Each laugh stabbed at him, but he swallowed the anger, letting it burn silently inside. He remembered all the times he had worked late, saved money carefully, trying to make ends meet. He remembered the sacrifices, the quiet nights when he went without things he wanted, so he could pay bills on time. And yet, here they were, judging him by the car he could barely afford to maintain. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of embarrassment and fury. He breathed deeply, forcing himself to remain calm. He didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing him react. The woman continued, pacing slightly in front of the car, gesturing toward the hood. "Really? This is your idea of transportation? I thought you were better than this," she said, rolling her eyes. Her tone was dripping with disdain. The young man stayed silent, feeling the anger build like a storm beneath the surface. He imagined his hands on the steering wheel tightening even more, fingers clenching as if he could crush the car's steering column with his thoughts. He wanted to say something, anything, but he knew words would not serve him here. Silence was stronger. As the morning grew brighter, more people began to notice. Some stopped on the sidewalk, curious, others simply passing by, stealing glances. A few tried to stifle their own laughter, pretending they weren't watching. The young man felt every pair of eyes on him, every judgment, every sneer, every thoughtless comment. He could feel the weight of their assumptions pressing down on him, but instead of breaking, he allowed it to forge a sharper edge inside him. He told himself, silently, that this moment would not define him. Not today, not ever. The woman walked closer, peering into the interior of the car. "Do you even know how to drive this thing properly? It looks like it's going to fall apart any second," she said, her voice rising with amusement. Some co-workers laughed at this, pointing and whispering, and a few took out their phones, snapping pictures, clearly intending to share them later. The young man's stomach churned with humiliation, but he refused to react. He sat still, pretending to inspect the dashboard, pretending to ignore them. Then, one of his co-workers, a man who usually considered himself clever, stepped forward. "Hey, man. Maybe you should just leave it here and take the bus. Or better yet, maybe someone can tow it for you," he said, chuckling as if he had delivered a witty joke. The young man's eyes flicked briefly toward him, narrowing, and a quiet heat spread through him. Every insult, every mocking laugh, every sideways glance was fuel. He felt something awakening inside, a plan forming, a desire not just to respond, but to transform this humiliation into something powerful. The woman finally shook her head, taking a dramatic step back. "I don't know how you live like this," she said, her voice trembling slightly with amusement and disdain. She turned to her friends, still laughing, and they walked away toward the office building. But the young man didn't move. He let them leave, listening to their fading laughter, letting it echo in his mind. His jaw was tight, his chest heaving, and he whispered under his breath, so softly that only he could hear, "You'll see tomorrow." The tension of that single statement was heavy, loaded with promise. It was a promise of change, of surprise, of justice in his own way. The audience, reading or watching, would feel a pulse of curiosity, asking themselves, what would he do? How would he turn this humiliation around? What kind of plan could possibly take the woman and the co-workers by surprise? The young man did not answer them yet. He did not need to. The suspense hung in the air, thick and electric, as the morning sun continued to rise over the parking lot. He started the engine again, the car coughing and wheezing under the strain, and slowly drove toward the office entrance. Every turn of the wheel felt like a quiet assertion of patience, of endurance, of something stronger than the ridicule he had faced. In his mind, he began to map out the steps he would take, visualizing the next day, imagining the expressions on their faces when he returned. Not in this old car, but in something astonishing, something that would leave them speechless. The idea was intoxicating, a spark that ignited every bit of his silent fury. As he parked near the office, he kept his hands on the wheel a moment longer, staring at the building. He saw the woman and a few others peering from the windows, noticing the car, probably commenting, probably mocking, still unaware of what was coming. He breathed in deeply, feeling a strange mixture of excitement and resolve. This wasn't about revenge in a cruel way. This was about transformation, about showing that hard work, patience, and determination would eventually speak louder than ridicule. Every detail of that morning, every sneer, every laugh, every whisper, was etched into his memory. They had underestimated him, as humans often do when they judge only what they see on the surface. But he knew that appearances could be changed, that impressions could be overturned, and that tomorrow would be the first chapter of that change. He whispered again, under his breath, a quiet vow, "You'll see tomorrow. I won't just show up. I will surprise you. You will never forget this." The audience, watching this unfold, is left on edge, hearts racing, wondering, what will happen? How will he surprise them? Will it be enough to silence their laughter? How far will he go to claim his dignity? The suspense stretches, the tension building, holding the viewers in a tight grip as the young man steps out of the car, closes the door, and walks toward the office. The scene ends on a cliffhanger, leaving the audience desperate to see the next moment, the next day, when the promise whispered in quiet fury will be fulfilled. The young man returned home that evening, the streets quiet around him, the hum of the old car's engine fading behind. He parked carefully in front of his small apartment building, the headlights cutting through the dim light, illuminating cracks in the sidewalk. He stepped out, feeling the tension still pulsing in his chest, a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and determination. The events of the morning played over and over in his mind. The mocking laughs, the pointed gestures, the way she had strutted past him like he was invisible. Each detail fueled the fire inside, a quiet storm of resolve. He went inside, closing the door behind him, the click of the lock sounding like the seal of a secret plan forming. He sat at his small desk, the one cluttered with papers, notebooks, and a laptop, and opened it. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, eyes narrowing as he began to search. He needed a plan, something that would not just surprise her but leave her stunned, something that would make every mocking word she had said crumble into silence. The young man typed phrases like luxury car rental one day, flashy sports car for surprise, and high-end supercar experience. He scrolled through websites, comparing options, noting down prices, locations, and availability. He was meticulous. He wrote down the model, the color, the features, imagining how every detail would impact her reaction. He paused and leaned back, rubbing his temples. This wasn't just about the car. It was about showing the result of patience, discipline, and hard work. He needed to be strategic, not impulsive. He thought about timing, about how he would enter the office parking lot, about which angle would catch the most attention, and how the woman would see him first. Every step, every movement, had to be calculated. He knew the importance of suspense. He couldn't just show up and expect a reaction. He had to build the moment in his mind first, feel it, anticipate it. As the night deepened, he began to visualize everything. He pictured the morning sunlight glinting off the polished hood of the supercar. He imagined the engine's roar as he pulled into the parking lot, the sharp turns of the tires, the glances of co-workers turning toward him in shock. He pictured her face, pale, eyes wide, jaw slightly dropped, her confident smile replaced with confusion and disbelief. He imagined the whispers spreading across the office, the shock rippling through the gossip chain. The young man smiled slightly at the image, a spark of excitement lighting his eyes. This was no longer about revenge alone. It was about transformation, about proving silently that appearances could be deceiving. He made a list of details: what time he would leave, which route to take, how to park for maximum effect. He even rehearsed in his mind how he would walk out of the car, how his posture would convey confidence, how his expression would remain calm, yet commanding. He imagined the reactions not just of the woman, but of the co-workers who had joined in the ridicule. The plan was precise, almost theatrical. Every gesture mattered, every second counted. The young man felt a thrill building inside him, a mixture of anticipation and determination. Then he checked the rental options again, finally finding a sleek, red supercar, a model that was both luxurious and eye-catching. He read the terms carefully, noting the pickup location, the insurance details, and the timing. He knew he could make it work if he left early in the morning, giving himself enough time to arrive before the office filled with people. The young man felt his heartbeat quicken. The plan was solidifying into reality. He could almost hear the gasps, the murmurs, the shock spreading across the parking lot as he parked the car perfectly in front of the office. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath, and allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. This wasn't just about showing off. It was about proving that effort, patience, and careful planning could overturn humiliation. He thought about the woman, imagining the change in her expression when she realized that her mockery had been met not with anger or confrontation, but with strategy and quiet power. That thought made his lips curve into a determined smile. He pictured her walking toward him, trying to speak, fumbling for words, realizing that she had underestimated him completely. The night stretched on, and he couldn't sleep. His mind kept running through the steps, the timing, the possible reactions. He considered every scenario. What if she tried to hide her reaction? What if the co-workers began whispering among themselves? What if someone else noticed the car first and caused chaos? He accounted for everything, mentally rehearsing his calm demeanor, the perfect timing, the controlled expressions. Every detail mattered. He knew that the suspense of the morning, the anticipation, was part of the power of the plan. The audience watching this unfold would feel the tension, the anticipation, wondering how the young man would execute such a bold move. As the hours passed, he packed a small bag for the morning, including the essentials he would need for the day, making sure nothing distracted him from the plan. He double-checked the pickup time, the route, and even the weather. He considered the angle of the sun, the position of cars in the lot, and even the likely path she would take toward the entrance. Nothing was left to chance. The young man was no longer just reacting to the humiliation of the morning. He was preparing to turn it into an unforgettable moment of triumph. Finally, as the first hints of dawn approached, he allowed himself a short rest. His mind was still active, running through the steps over and over, imagining the expressions, the whispers, the surprise. He could feel the suspense building like a tight coil inside him. Tomorrow, he promised himself, tomorrow would be the day when the laughter of the morning would be replaced by awe, when his patience and strategy would speak louder than the mocking voices that had haunted him. Every detail, every moment, every calculation had led to this. The night was long, the plan meticulous, but the young man felt unstoppable. He knew that tomorrow, the office, the woman, and all the mocking co-workers would witness something they never expected. As he closed his eyes, finally resting, a smile lingered on his face. It wasn't a smile of arrogance, but of quiet confidence. The suspense was palpable, the anticipation sharp. The audience, following his journey, would feel every pulse of excitement, every beat of tension, knowing that the next day would bring a spectacle of transformation, strategy, and surprise. Tomorrow, the mockery would end. Tomorrow, the young man's plan would unfold perfectly, and the lesson of patience, effort, and cleverness would be revealed in the most striking way. The stage was set, the actors unaware, and the suspense hung thick in the air, ready to explode with the sunrise. The next morning arrived with a soft, golden light spilling over the city, brushing the streets in warmth. The young man woke before dawn, the excitement in his chest making sleep almost impossible. He dressed quickly in his clean, crisp clothes, simple yet sharp, knowing his appearance would add to the impact. He glanced at the clock, just enough time to pick up the car and reach the office before anyone else noticed. Every detail of the plan he had rehearsed the night before played in his mind, like a perfectly scripted scene. He took a deep breath, feeling the tension of anticipation, the thrill of the unknown. Stepping outside, he felt the crisp morning air fill his lungs. The streets were quiet, almost empty, the world still waking up. His heart beat faster as he walked toward the car rental location, imagining the expressions he would see later. The sleek, red supercar waited for him, polished to perfection, its engine silent but promising power. He ran his fingers over the smooth hood, feeling the luxury in every curve, every line of the vehicle. This was more than a car, it was a statement, a promise, a calculated punch that would strike exactly where it needed to. He adjusted the mirrors, checked the tires, and started the engine. The low rumble of the powerful machine filled the empty street, vibrating through his chest. It sounded like victory, like the future coming alive. He drove carefully but with purpose, imagining the glances that would follow him as he approached the office parking lot. The streets were gradually waking up, a few early commuters casting curious looks at the striking car, unaware of the drama about to unfold. Each turn, each light, each gentle press on the accelerator built the suspense, the energy inside him tightening like a coiled spring. As he neared the office, the parking lot came into view. It was just as he had imagined. Co-workers arriving, chatting, laughing, moving toward their morning routines, unaware of the spectacle approaching. And then he felt the thrill of anticipation spike as he noticed her, the woman who had mocked him the day before, walking toward the entrance, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She was speaking to another colleague, laughing, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. He slowed slightly, letting her come into full view, savoring the moment, the suspense tightening with every step he took. Then, with precise timing, he turned the corner of the parking lot and entered, the supercar's engine growling like a predator announcing its presence. The sound turned heads instantly. Eyes widened, mouths slightly parted, and whispers began to spread. People stopped mid-step, turning toward him as he drove past slowly, confidently, the red paint gleaming in the morning light. The powerful curves of the car caught the sun, reflecting it in a way that made the vehicle almost dazzling. Every detail he had planned, every anticipation, played out exactly as rehearsed. The woman froze in place, the coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand. Her eyes widened, her mouth opening in shock, as she took in the car, the presence, the aura of calm confidence radiating from the young man. She had expected nothing like this. She had imagined him arriving the same way as yesterday, fumbling and struggling, nothing more. But this was beyond imagination. Her laughter vanished, replaced by disbelief. She stepped back, a hand reaching to cover her mouth, as her mind scrambled to process what she was seeing. Other co-workers began murmuring among themselves, pointing subtly, some taking out their phones. The whispers turned into soft exclamations. "Is that him? How did he get that car? I can't believe it." The young man's eyes scanned the lot, noting every reaction, every stunned face. The suspense hung thick in the air, electrifying the moment. He drove slowly past the spaces, deliberately making sure as many people as possible saw him, felt the shock, absorbed the realization that he was no longer the man they had mocked. Every subtle movement, every turn of the wheel, every flash of the car's polished surface added layers to the impact he was creating. As he parked in the spot directly in front of the entrance, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He stepped out, closing the door smoothly, the sound echoing lightly across the lot. His posture was calm, confident, unshakable. He did not rush, he did not fidget. Every movement was deliberate, every glance controlled. The engine's low rumble slowly faded behind him, leaving the silence of awe and surprise in its place. The audience, following this moment, would feel the tension, their curiosity reaching a peak. What would she do next? How would she respond? The suspense was electric, nearly tangible. She took a hesitant step forward, still staring at him, the image of the car reflected in her wide eyes. Her confidence from yesterday had evaporated, replaced by confusion and disbelief. She opened her mouth, tried to form words, but none came out. He allowed the moment to stretch, letting the suspense linger, letting her realize the scale of what she had underestimated. He didn't rush her, he didn't speak. His silence was a powerful weapon, sharper than any words he could have said. The tension built, wrapping around everyone in the lot like a tight, invisible thread, making every heartbeat feel heavier, every glance more intense. Some co-workers dared to approach, whispers escaping their lips, questions forming, but they too faltered under the weight of the moment. He walked slowly toward the entrance, letting the car remain in full view, letting its gleaming red hood and powerful presence continue to command attention. Every eye followed him, every jaw dropped slightly, every whispered comment adding to the crescendo of suspense. The young man could feel it. Every calculated step, every perfectly timed movement, was creating a ripple effect, a wave of astonishment that none of them would forget. The woman finally managed to stammer. I don't, how? Her words fell apart mid-sentence, replaced by silence. She had expected humiliation from him yesterday, but she hadn't imagined mastery, strategy, and surprise combined in such a dazzling display. The audience watching could almost feel the tension, the pulse of suspense, the thrill of witnessing someone rise in such a dramatic, unforgettable way. Every reaction, every gasp, every subtle movement around the lot was part of the symphony he had orchestrated. The young man reached the sidewalk, stopping deliberately in front of the car. He adjusted his posture, straightened his shoulders, and looked toward the entrance. His calm, collected expression contrasted sharply with the chaos of disbelief around him. The suspense lingered, almost unbearable in its intensity, as the audience awaited the next move, the next reaction. Would she apologize? Would she regain composure? Would the co-workers finally understand the impact of their mockery? He let them wonder, letting the tension stretch, a silent promise that the story was only beginning. As he stood there, the morning sun reflecting off the car's polished surface, a quiet sense of triumph settled over him. Not arrogance, not malice, but satisfaction in a plan executed perfectly. The audience felt the suspense and anticipation continue, knowing that the next moments would only deepen the impact, that the story was far from over, that the lesson in patience, strategy, and quiet power was about to unfold fully. The stage was set, the reactions real, and the young man had seized control, turning humiliation into opportunity, mockery into awe, and leaving everyone waiting with bated breath for what would happen next. The young man stood calmly beside the gleaming supercar, his posture straight, his expression composed, radiating quiet confidence. The morning sun glinted off the polished red hood, catching the attention of every person in the parking lot, including the woman who had mocked him just a day before. She took a hesitant step forward, her eyes wide, mouth slightly open, trying to find words but failing. Every attempt at a sentence faltered, swallowed by her own disbelief. The young man let her struggle, saying nothing, letting the suspense stretch in the air like a living thing. The onlookers watched in fascination, whispers spreading through the lot as co-workers exchanged glances, their curiosity growing by the second. She tried to regain her composure, brushing imaginary dust from her designer outfit, attempting to hide her embarrassment. Her usual confident smile faltered, replaced by a nervous twitch at the corner of her lips. She approached cautiously, as if stepping closer might shatter the illusion of power she had carried all along. I don't understand, she stammered, her voice trembling. The young man tilted his head slightly, acknowledging her without saying a word. His silence was deliberate, almost theatrical, making her realize the magnitude of the transformation she was witnessing. She had mocked him when he appeared weak, fumbling, and embarrassed, but now he radiated control, power, and unexpected success. The suspense tightened, almost suffocating, as the audience imagined the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. Other co-workers moved closer, curious but hesitant. They had seen him struggle yesterday, laughed along with her, shared in the mockery, but now, seeing him beside the supercar, they were uncertain. Some tried to whisper compliments, awkward and forced, while others simply stared in disbelief. The young man's eyes scanned the crowd subtly, taking in every reaction, every subtle movement, every widened eye. He allowed the tension to linger, savoring the moment like a chess player who had forced his opponent into check, knowing the next move would decide the outcome. The woman finally stopped a few feet from him, her hands gripping the folder tightly, knuckles white. She swallowed nervously, trying to maintain the illusion of control, but her eyes betrayed the chaos of emotions inside her. Shock, regret, disbelief, and a twinge of fear that maybe she had underestimated him. I didn't expect this, she whispered, her voice faltering. The young man gave a small, calm smile, not smug, not arrogant, just measured and confident. He wanted her to feel the weight of her words, the sting of her arrogance, without him having to utter a single sharp retort. The suspense was electric, a quiet tension that the audience could feel as if it were their own heartbeat quickening. He walked slowly around the car, his movements deliberate, each step precise. The sound of his shoes on the concrete echoed faintly, a metronome of controlled power. Her eyes followed every step, wide and fixed, trying to process how someone she had dismissed so easily could command such presence. She tried to speak again, to reclaim some dignity, but the words tangled in her throat. The co-workers whispered among themselves, sharing astonished glances, realizing that their judgment yesterday had been shallow, misguided, and perhaps unfair. The young man's silence spoke louder than any words could have, every glance, every controlled movement, every confident breath reinforcing the transformation they were witnessing. He stopped directly in front of her, maintaining eye contact, letting her squirm slightly under the intensity. She shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable, trying to hide the rapid pulse of surprise and regret that ran through her. The audience feels suspense in this moment. Will she apologize? Will she confront him? Will she retreat? The young man's calm exterior was a stark contrast to the storm inside her, and the tension stretched, holding everyone in the lot in a near-silent grip, every pair of eyes following the drama unfolding before them. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft, almost inaudible. How did you do this? Her question was more than about the car. It was about him, about the unexpected confidence, the transformation that had taken place in just 24 hours. The young man tilted his head slightly, a faint, enigmatic smile curling his lips. He let the suspense linger, refusing to answer immediately, letting the weight of her mockery from the previous day settle heavily on her conscience. Every second of silence stretched longer, magnifying the impact of his presence. The woman's hands trembled slightly, the folder pressing against her chest as if to hold herself together. Her mind raced with questions, regrets, and the realization that she had misjudged him completely. The young man remained still, letting the car behind him glint in the sunlight, every curve a reminder of the effort, planning, and patience that had gone into this moment. He didn't gloat, he didn't boast. He simply existed in a state of controlled power that left her speechless and the co-workers awestruck. The suspense, the tension, the anticipation of what he would do next, held everyone captive, every heartbeat feeling heavier with curiosity and excitement. He finally spoke, his voice calm and deliberate. Sometimes, things are not what they seem. The words were soft, yet they carried the weight of the previous day's humiliation, a quiet lesson in patience, persistence, and transformation. The woman's eyes widened further, realization dawning slowly, her lips parting in a silent acknowledgement of the lesson she had been taught. The audience feels the suspense peak here. Every detail, every movement, every expression had built to this confrontation, and the impact was almost palpable. The young man stepped back slightly, letting her absorb the moment, letting the suspense stretch, letting the audience imagine the pride, the surprise, and the shifting power dynamic. She finally lowered her gaze, unsure of what to say, realizing that mocking him yesterday had been a mistake, and today, witnessing his confidence and the dramatic display, she understood that underestimating him had been her error. The tension hung, thick and electric, as he turned slightly toward the car, still calm, still confident, allowing her and the audience to feel the silent power of his preparation and patience. Every whisper, every glance, every gasp in the parking lot amplified the moment, stretching the suspense, holding the audience captive. The confrontation was not loud or dramatic in words, but in presence, in poise, in the quiet power of someone who had transformed humiliation into triumph without a single harsh word. The suspense lingered as the young man finally walked toward the car, ready to continue his calculated display, leaving the woman and the co-workers to process the lesson they had just witnessed. Every heartbeat, every glance, every reaction was magnified, keeping the audience engaged, invested, and eager for what would come next in the unfolding story of revenge, patience, and quiet mastery. The young man leaned casually against the gleaming red supercar, his posture relaxed yet confident, every movement precise, calculated, and deliberate. The morning air seemed to vibrate with tension, the electric charge of anticipation surrounding the parking lot like an invisible force. The woman who had mocked him the day before stood a few feet away, her eyes wide, mouth slightly open, clearly struggling to process what she was witnessing. The co-workers gathered around, whispering, exchanging glances, their curiosity mingled with awe. The young man allowed the moment to stretch, prolonging the suspense, letting the weight of the previous day's humiliation press down on her, while his calm demeanor radiated quiet mastery. He let his eyes roam over the crowd, noting the subtle expressions, the widening eyes, the whispered conversations that were forming in hushed tones. Some tried to hide their astonishment, while others openly stared, unable to tear their gaze away. Each reaction added to the suspense, each subtle gesture building the tension to a near-breaking point. He understood that the lesson he was about to deliver was not one that required shouting or confrontation. It was a lesson delivered through presence, through patience, through carefully orchestrated timing, and through the sheer contrast between their expectations and reality. The woman's face shifted through a spectrum of emotions: shock, regret, disbelief, and finally, a dawning realization. She had expected him to arrive as he had yesterday, struggling, fumbling, and embarrassingly inadequate. She had mocked him openly, perhaps thinking she was clever, thinking she held power. But now, witnessing him beside the supercar, calm, confident, and controlled, she understood the depth of her misjudgment. The young man allowed her to stew in that realization, giving her no escape from the truth she was forced to confront. He took a slow step toward the car, his movements deliberate, each one emphasizing control and confidence. The sunlight reflected off the hood, glinting like fire, and the powerful low hum of the engine reminded everyone present that this was no ordinary morning, no ordinary confrontation. The lesson he was imparting was clear. Mockery and arrogance could be met not with anger, but with preparation, patience, and calculated brilliance. The suspense was almost tangible, as if the air itself had thickened, and the audience could feel every heartbeat echoing in their ears. The woman finally found her voice, barely above a whisper. I never expected this, her words faltered, and she took a small step back, instinctively realizing that she had underestimated him completely. He tilted his head slightly, letting her feel the impact of her own actions, the weight of her arrogance, without needing to speak more than a few words. His silence carried power, a quiet authority that demanded acknowledgement. The lesson was not in humiliation, it was in revelation. She had mocked weakness, but now she saw strength, planning, and intelligence manifest in the most dramatic of ways. He glanced briefly at his co-workers, who had laughed and pointed the day before, their whispers now subdued, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. The young man understood that the lesson extended beyond the woman herself. It was a demonstration for everyone who had doubted, judged, or underestimated him. Every reaction was part of the crescendo, every silent gasp, every widened eye reinforcing the message. Respect is earned through effort, strategy, and composure. The suspense remained, hanging in the air like a thick fog, making the audience lean in, eager to see how the scene would conclude. He finally spoke, his voice calm, steady, and deliberate. Sometimes, people judge too quickly. They see only what is on the surface and miss the effort, the planning, and the patience that lies beneath. His words were simple, yet they carried weight, the kind of weight that pressed on the conscience of anyone who had witnessed his transformation. The woman's eyes softened slightly, a glimmer of regret and understanding crossing her face. She realized that her mockery had been shallow, that her confidence had blinded her to the reality of dedication and persistence. The suspense hung in every word, in every pause, in every breath. The young man straightened his shoulders, his calm confidence undisturbed by the shifting dynamics around him. He didn't need to boast. The display of the car, the control of his own demeanor, and the silent recognition of his achievement were enough. He let the lesson resonate without forcing it, understanding that true impact often came through subtlety, through carefully executed actions rather than loud words. The suspense remained thick, as if the audience could feel the anticipation stretching into the next act, wondering what the ultimate resolution would be, how the woman would finally react, and what the final statement of triumph would look like. She finally lowered her gaze, realizing that she had underestimated him completely, that the arrogance she had shown was misplaced, and that the quiet, calculated power he now displayed was far beyond anything she had expected. The young man allowed her to absorb the moment fully, letting the suspense linger, letting the audience feel the tension as they watched the slow unfolding of understanding, humility, and silent respect. Every gesture, every glance, every subtle movement contributed to the lesson, making it unforgettable. The co-workers began to drift away slowly, some whispering quietly among themselves, others stealing glances back at him, trying to process what they had witnessed. The suspense continued, a quiet hum of anticipation for what might come next, leaving the audience eager for the resolution, the final act of the story. The young man walked deliberately toward the car, his movements smooth and controlled, radiating calm authority, letting the lesson settle in the minds of those present. He had turned humiliation into triumph, mockery into awe, and confusion into understanding, all without a single unnecessary word. The woman took one last hesitant step toward him, a mixture of respect and lingering surprise in her eyes. She understood now that true strength lay not in arrogance or mockery but in preparation, patience, and the silent execution of a carefully planned strategy. The suspense remained, tantalizing, as the young man prepared to leave, allowing the audience to sense that the story was far from over, that the climax was still to come, and that the final act would seal the lesson, leaving everyone with a memory they would not forget. As he slid into the driver's seat, the sunlight reflecting off the polished hood, he took a deep breath, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a plan executed flawlessly. The suspense hung in the air, thick and electric, a promise that the final moments would deliver the ultimate closure, the ultimate triumph, and the final lesson of patience, strategy, and quiet power. The audience, captivated, could feel every heartbeat, every gasp, every whispered thought, eager for the next, final part of the story to reveal the complete resolution of his journey from humiliation to unstoppable confidence. The young man slid into the driver's seat of the gleaming red supercar, the polished leather warm under his hands. He started the engine, a deep, throaty rumble that vibrated through the parking lot, drawing eyes from every direction. The woman who had mocked him yesterday froze, her coffee cup trembling slightly as the sound reached her ears. Her colleagues whispered and nudged one another, some pointing, some stepping back in disbelief. The young man leaned back, a calm smile playing on his lips, his eyes sweeping across the faces of those who had underestimated him. Every detail had unfolded exactly as he had planned. Every gasp, every whisper, every widened eye was part of the culmination of his silent strategy. He began to drive slowly, deliberately, toward the lot's exit, ensuring the car's polished curves and commanding presence were visible from every angle. The sunlight danced across the red paint, glinting like fire, and every turn of the tires, every hum of the engine, reinforced the spectacle. The woman followed him with her eyes, unable to look away, realizing fully for the first time that she had misjudged him, that her mockery had been both cruel and premature. She tried to speak, to reclaim some dignity, but her words caught in her throat, swallowed by disbelief. The young man allowed the silence to stretch, letting the tension and anticipation grow, savoring the moment without needing to say a word. He parked momentarily at a strategic spot near the entrance, allowing the full view of the car to command attention one last time. His calm, confident posture contrasted sharply with the shifting expressions around him. Every coworker who had laughed yesterday now stared in awe, some still whispering, others simply frozen. He stepped out, closing the door with a soft click, his movements deliberate, every step measured, every glance intentional. The woman's eyes followed him, wide, searching, finally registering the full impact of his transformation. The audience watching could feel the suspense peak, the tension crackling in the air, every heartbeat synchronized with the drama unfolding before them. He approached the entrance slowly, turning slightly to allow her a final, deliberate view. "You see," he said calmly, his voice low but firm, carrying weight without arrogance. "Patience, preparation, and determination speak louder than words or mockery. Judging someone too quickly can blind you to the truth." Her shoulders slumped slightly, the realization settling in, the humiliation of her earlier arrogance softened by awe. She understood now that her laughter and cruelty had been met not with retaliation, but with careful strategy, showing the power of quiet resolve. He returned to the car, stepping in smoothly, and started the engine again. This time, he let the powerful hum resonate through the lot as he drove slowly, savoring the moment of closure. The woman's eyes followed every movement, no words escaping, no snickers remaining, only the recognition of her mistake and the weight of the lesson he had imparted. Co-workers whispered quietly among themselves, some still stunned, others nodding subtly in acknowledgement of the skill, intelligence, and foresight displayed. The suspense began to ease, replaced by satisfaction, as the young man's plan had reached its full, perfect conclusion. He drove out of the lot slowly, deliberately keeping the car visible to everyone around, ensuring that the memory of this moment would linger. Every detail, the polished car, his calm confidence, the silent power of his presence, left an imprint on the minds of those who had witnessed it. The woman's face reflected the mix of regret and admiration, understanding finally that underestimating him had been a grave error. The audience could feel the tension dissolve into a satisfying payoff, the suspense transitioning into the relief and thrill of seeing justice served through cleverness rather than confrontation. As he reached the street, he glanced briefly in the rearview mirror, catching the lingering expressions of those still in the parking lot. The whispers, the wide eyes, the subtle nods of acknowledgement, they all confirmed the success of his plan. He had turned humiliation into triumph, mockery into respect, and disbelief into awe. His journey from embarrassment to victory was complete, and the lesson had been delivered in the most dramatic yet elegant way possible. The suspense had transformed into a powerful, unforgettable conclusion, leaving the audience with a lasting impression of cleverness, patience, and quiet mastery. He drove on, the engine's low rumble fading into the morning streets, leaving behind a parking lot of stunned witnesses and a woman who would never forget the impact of his arrival. The young man's smile remained calm, confident, and satisfied, knowing that he had achieved more than just a spectacle. He had demonstrated a truth that could not be disputed, a lesson that would linger far longer than any mocking laugh. The audience could feel the closure, the triumphant resolution, the final release of suspense, while still savoring the thrill of the journey they had witnessed. Finally, as he merged into the flow of the city streets, he allowed himself a deep breath, a quiet sense of victory washing over him. The plan had worked perfectly, the lesson had been delivered flawlessly, and the humiliation of the previous day had been transformed into a memory of triumph. Every glance, every whispered word, every astonished reaction had been orchestrated with precision, patience, and calm confidence. The suspense had reached its peak, the tension fully resolved, and the audience was left with a sense of satisfaction, understanding the power of strategy, preparation, and quiet resilience. As the city woke fully around him, the young man drove on, the sunlight reflecting off the hood of the supercar, casting a brilliant glow. The woman and his co-workers remained behind, absorbing the lesson of the morning. The story of mockery turned into awe, humiliation transformed into triumph. The audience, captivated throughout, felt the complete closure, the final reveal of a journey that began with embarrassment and ended with unstoppable confidence. The suspense had resolved, the lesson had been delivered, and the story concluded with a quiet, unforgettable power, leaving every observer, both within the parking lot and among the audience, breathless with admiration and understanding.